Nightmare on Elm Street has always been an incredibly divisive series. Although any film series that has run for as long as it has will inevitably divide opinion. But I don't think it's particularly controversial or subversive for me to claim that Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, is the very best of the series. Or, at the very least, it is certainly my favourite. This film, and its sequel, which we will be talking about at a later date on this channel, is actually quite special to me. And I think it's because it's a piece of media that I encountered at exactly the right time in my life. Whenever I think of this film, I do think about the warm spring night on which it first had the chance to captivate me. And the film, in my mind, has become synonymous with the classic 80s slasher. But it stands head and shoulders above the majority of its contemporaries because of its careful, considered exploration of mental illness and the struggles of combating and conquering that illness. The film opens with our new protagonist, Kristen, creating a replica of the house the original film's protagonist, Nancy Thompson, lived in as she was terrorised by series antagonist Freddy Krueger. Kristen simply recognises it as the house she sees in her dreams, at this point unaware that she is next in line to be visited by Freddy. The film wastes little time in bringing Kristen face to face with Krueger, the real-world injuries he inflicts upon her appearing as a botched suicide attempt. Kristen is quickly sped to hospital and is confined to a psychiatric ward amongst other teenagers who are all connected by their knowledge of Freddy Krueger. Nancy Thompson returns to the franchise as a brilliant young researcher who immediately recognises the presence of Freddy in the ward and sets out to help them evade and defeat him once and for all. Thematically, the film concerns itself with an exploration of mental illness and mental health, and also the divide that separates the older and younger generations. This latter element was key in the first film, the younger generation inheriting the sins of their elders and their consequences, which was made tangible in the form of Freddy Krueger. Just so we're all on the same page, the first film makes clear that Krueger only hunts the teenagers of each movie in the nightmares because their parents banded together to murder him after he was not convicted for his own crimes. In the former film, that theme is subtly interwoven into the greater narrative as not to dominate it, which I believe is part of the film's lasting appeal. Although the film spoke directly to the youth of the 1980s, it hasn't lost its ability to connect with viewers in the present. Dream Warriors is much the same in this regard, but it expands upon this generational divide by fixing this idea to the exploration of mental health and mental illness. Whereas Freddy embodies the idea of the younger generation inheriting these sins committed by their elders in the original film, Dream Warriors seems to establish him as the symbolic embodiment of the mental illnesses that plague their psyches. The generational divide is then an element that is fueled by and drives their illness. It separates them from the adults around them, save for Nancy, who acts as a bridge between the old and the young. And the lack of recognition and misunderstanding of the issues you face, i.e. the insistence that Freddy Krueger is not real and instead the Dream Warriors are experiencing a group psychosis, appears to make the issue far worse. The lack of proper support results in death before Nancy is able to intervene and help them. And the setting of the film, a psychiatric ward in a public hospital, is not terribly unusual for a horror film. But where Dream Warriors differs is in its presentation of the ward. Typically, the residents of the psychiatric ward in the horror film are to be feared, or in fact the source of the horror. Here, instead, the residents are empathetic and personable. They struggle with their illnesses, but it does not define their character, and I think this is one of the reasons why the cast of Dream Warriors is considered the very best of the series. Their popularity was clearly high enough to see the survivors appear in the follow-up, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And, as Nancy Thompson assures them, they are, in fact, survivors. This determination and spirit that drives the film allows Dream Warriors to ultimately come to a positive conclusion in its examination of mental illness. That fighting back is not only possible, but essential. And this is arguably emphasised by the powerful anthemic theme song that closes out the film. And Freddy is, in my opinion, entirely as dominating and as menacing as he is in the original film, an effect that is established by the brilliant lighting and cinematography on display here. But the titular Dream Warriors choose to fight back and assert their identity and autonomy in the process. And this aspect is underlined by the opening moments of the Dream Master. Having seemingly vanquished Freddy, and consequently having overcome their mental illnesses that Freddy seems to represent in this movie, they live normal, healthy lives, attending high school and forming stable relationships. And the depiction of Freddy as someone who exploits not only the fears of the core cast, but their hopes and dreams, underlines this theme of mental health and more thoroughly establishes him in this film as a general embodiment of illnesses like depression and anxiety. He is the disruptor of aspects of their life that bring them genuine joy, eating away at these things before consuming them entirely in death. And the film is actually incredibly subtle at underlining this at times. The series, for the most part, does make the lines that separate the real world and the dream world suitably ambiguous, characters slipping from one to the other with ease, disorientating both them and the audience. But there is a point in the scene of Jennifer's death where Dick Cavett, conducting a televised interview, asks the actress Zsa Zsa Gabor for tips for young actresses, Jennifer herself being dead set on making a name for herself in the entertainment industry after her dismissal from the ward.
And as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to Los Angeles to be an actress.
And this is the point that I choose to believe that she falls asleep and fully into Freddy's grasp, giving the swift distortion and perversion of a dream that Jennifer has set her hopes upon realizing in reality. The taking of something wonderful and the subsequent twisting of that good thing into something harmful and dangerous. But the Dream Warriors eventually learn to utilize their strengths, talents, and interests to combat Krueger. Will, for example, is incredibly enthusiastic about fantasy and tabletop games such as Dungeons & Dragons. Thus, in his dreams, he becomes the Wizard Master. Kincaid prides himself on his mental fortitude and physical capability.
He couldn't hack it, so he got nailed. Period.
Oh, yeah. Big, tough, fat ass. How long are you gonna last?
I'm gonna last longer than any of you.
And therefore harnesses a superhuman strength in fighting Krueger. And Joey, who spends the majority of the film entirely mute.
It's Joey. He used to be a debater in school, but now he doesn't talk much.
Regains his voice to deliver what initially appears to be a decisive blow to Krueger. Each character's abilities within the dreams center around the harnessing of talents that reflect and solidify their sense of self. They strive to assert themselves in the face of something that would have them be swallowed up into nothing. Admittedly, the actual killing blow to Freddy is delivered through Nancy's colleague at the hospital, purifying the bones of Krueger with holy water. But this event that happens outside of much of the main action that dominates the film serves more as an explanation as to why Freddy will definitely, absolutely, irrevocably be defeated in this installment. Personally, I would have preferred that the film ended with Joey's reassertion of self through the use of his voice for the first time in the film, but I don't think this harms the main themes of the film in any significant way. And maybe it could be argued that I'm stretching slightly to reach some of the conclusions I've come to about Dream Warriors. Certainly, I'd say that my interpretation of this film has been influenced by my own struggles with mental illness, but that's the beauty of art, isn't it? It's malleable, flexible, able to withstand examination and interpretation in order to help us better understand ourselves and the world around us. And I think Dream Warriors is special because it has both allowed me to have a better understanding of mental illness, and that although the act of combating it can initially seem hopeless, dangerous even, there is value in fighting for your sense of self and your future. And that's my takeaway from Dream Warriors, anyways. Hello, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you haven't seen Dream Warriors, or if you haven't seen Dream Warriors in a very long time, that this sort of convinced you to go back over it and give it a re-evaluation. I do really think it's a wonderful film. It's probably my favourite of the Elm Street series. It's one of my favourite 80s slashers in general. And as I sort of teased, I do plan to look at the Dream Master at a later date. I believe that thematically it is quite similar to Dream Warriors, but, you know, distinct enough in its own ways to merit its separate video. I also wanted to thank a lot of the commenters that I've got on my first couple of videos. The support has been incredibly encouraging, so I just wanted to thank you for your support and hope I can keep creating content that will keep entertaining people, ideally. So Yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.